still remember the exact moment the laughter stopped. Not gradually. Not the way conversations fade when someone changes the subject. It stopped the way a power line snaps. 1 second there's current, the next there's nothing, and everyone at the table feels it. My boyfriend's older brother had just said, with complete confidence and a smile that had probably charmed a lot of rooms before this one, the problem with corporate finance these days is that people get promoted before they actually understand what they're doing. No accountability. No real skin in the game. He was looking at me when he said it, not accusatorially. That was almost worse. He was looking at me the way someone looks at a student they've decided to take under their wing. Expectant, a little indulgent, waiting for me to nod and say something like that makes so much sense, I never thought about it that way. His name is Derek. He's 43, the kind of man who fills a room with his shoulders before he's said a word. He spent 12 years at a regional bank before starting his own financial consulting firm, which by his own account had grown substantially. He mentioned this within the first 15 minutes of meeting me. I smiled and reached for my water glass. My boyfriend, Caleb, was sitting to my left. I felt him go very still beside me. He knows me well enough to recognize the particular quality of my silence. Caleb and I had been together for almost 2 years before I finally met his family in person. That sounds longer than it was, or maybe it sounds exactly as long as it was. His parents live in Scottsdale, Arizona. We're in Chicago. There was always something, a conference, a flight delay, a stretch of months that blurred together faster than either of us expected. His family does a big reunion-style Thanksgiving every other year, rotating between siblings' houses, and this was the year it landed at Derek's place in Phoenix. I want to be honest about how I felt driving to Derek's house that Thursday afternoon. Caleb had described his brother as a lot, which in sibling translation means brace yourself. His parents, from everything I'd heard, were warm, easy people. Retired, content, the kind of couple that still holds hands in parking lots. His sister-in-law, Derek's wife, was apparently the one who kept Derek from being completely insufferable, and I had already decided I was going to like her. But Derek I was less sure about. Caleb had warned me in the most careful, affectionate way possible. He's going to ask what you do, and then he's going to have opinions about it. Everyone has opinions, I said. He has opinions, Caleb said, and I understood the distinction. I work in private equity. Specifically, I'm a principal at a mid-market PE firm. I've been doing this for 8 years. I made partner track 2 years ago and was formally promoted to principal last spring. I'm 31 years old, which, I'll acknowledge, is young for the role. I worked extremely hard to get there, started earlier than most, and had a few strokes of genuine luck along the way. I'm not under any illusion that talent alone explains it. I don't lead with any of this when I meet people. It tends to change conversations in ways I'm not always in the mood for. At work, it's relevant. Everywhere else, it's just information that seems to make people recalibrate. So when Derek asked, about 10 minutes after we arrived, "So what do you do, Nora?" I said I worked in finance and left it at that. He nodded. What kind of finance? Private equity? Oh, a pause. Junior analyst? I was 31 and wearing a blazer that cost more than his watch, but I understand why people assume what they assume. Principal, I said. He didn't quite register it. Or maybe he registered it and filed it away under "she thinks she's a principal," the way some people do when they haven't decided yet whether to take you seriously. Well, he said, it's a good industry to get into while you're young. Plenty of time to learn. Caleb, from across the room, made eye contact with me over his mother's shoulder. He mouthed something that was either sorry or "I told you." The table at Thanksgiving held 11 people. Derek's dining room was set the way his house was set. Expensively, deliberately, the kind of home where someone spent real time making sure everything projected the right image. I don't say that critically. I've been in a lot of homes like that. I grew up in a house where we taped the tablecloth down with masking tape before company came. Caleb's parents were exactly as advertised. His mother made sure I had enough sweet potato casserole. His father asked me genuine questions about Chicago and actually listened to the answers. His sister-in-law, Pam, sat across from me and within 20 minutes had told me 3 stories that made me laugh so hard I had to set down my fork. She caught my eye a couple of times during the Derek moments that followed, and there was something in her expression, not quite apology, not quite warning, more like, I see you. Just hold on. The Derek moment started early. It began with a conversation about interest rates, which is a topic that tends to bring out a certain kind of confidence in a certain kind of man. Derek had opinions about the Fed, about inflation hedging, about what the market was going to do in Q1. None of these opinions were wildly wrong. Some of them were reasonable, but he stated them with the certainty of someone who hadn't had his reasoning seriously challenged in a while, and he directed most of them toward the end of the table where I was sitting in the particular way people do when they want an audience rather than a conversation. I nodded. I asked a question here and there. I did not correct anything. Caleb's father changed the subject to college football, which created a 20-minute reprieve. Then someone, I genuinely don't remember who, mentioned that a family friend had recently invested in a small startup and lost most of it, and Derek was off again. That's the thing people don't understand, he said, reaching for the gravy. Regular people think private equity is this glamorous thing. VCs flying around, billion-dollar deals. The reality is, it's a very club-eye industry. Very hard to break into unless you went to the right schools, know the right people. And a lot of the time the actual analysis is being done by people who are, no offense, pretty junior. The partners swoop in for the handshake. He looked at me while he said that last part, not maliciously. I want to be clear about that. Derek is not a cruel person. He is the particular kind of confident that doesn't require cruelty. It's just chronic, ambient, so deeply embedded that he doesn't notice when it fills up a room. That's an interesting perspective, I said. Have you seen that dynamic? In your work? Everyone at that end of the table was quiet in the particular way people get quiet when they're watching something and aren't sure what it is yet. I have, I said. I've also seen the opposite. Sure, he said in a tone that meant of course you have, sweetie. I'm just speaking generally. Caleb put his hand on my knee under the table. Here is something I have learned over years of being a woman in a room full of men who have already decided what I am. There is a version of this situation where you correct the record immediately, where you lay out your credentials like cards on a table and watch someone recalibrate in real time. I understand the appeal. I've felt it plenty. But I've also learned that the most interesting thing you can do, sometimes, is wait. Not because silence is more dignified. Sometimes it isn't. But because there are moments where patience yields something more than correction does. Where the truth surfaces on its own, and all you have to do is be there when it does. I was waiting for that moment. I wasn't certain it was coming, but I've sat across enough tables to recognize when a conversation has more track to run on. Derek's friend, a man named Phil who worked in commercial real estate and had been mostly quiet through dinner, mentioned a deal he'd heard about, a mid-market manufacturing company in the Midwest that had just gone through a recapitalization. He'd seen it in some trade publication, couldn't remember which one. Bellworth Industrial, I said, before I'd really decided to. They both looked at me. That's the one, Phil said. You read about it? I was on the deal team, I said. A small silence. You worked on that deal? Derek said. I led the deal. He set his fork down. Not dramatically, just set it down. Bellworth was your firm's deal? Bellworth was my deal, I said. I sourced it, ran the process, managed the debt financing. Closed 14 months ago. We're already ahead of our return projections. The table had gone the way tables go. Someone was suddenly very interested in their green beans. Caleb's mother said, quietly and warmly, Nora, that sounds like an incredible amount of work. It was, I said. I like that kind of work. Pam was looking at her husband. I couldn't read her expression exactly, but I had the sense that she was having a private and quite satisfying moment of her own. Derek was quiet for a few seconds. He picked his fork back up. He looked at me not with embarrassment, exactly, more with the expression of someone who has just realized a map they've been holding is slightly wrong. Not catastrophically wrong. Just enough that they have to reorient. Bellworth is a real company, he said finally. That's a real deal. It is, I said. He nodded slowly. What was the EBITDA multiple on exit? And just like that, the conversation shifted. Not into an apology. Derek is not a man who apologizes quickly or easily, and I didn't need him to. What shifted was the nature of his engagement. He started asking questions instead of making statements. Real questions. The kind that assume the person across from you knows what they're talking about. We spent the next 40 minutes talking about deal structure, operating leverage, and the particular challenges of Midwest industrial companies in the current interest rate environment. Derek knows more than he's given credit for, honestly. He's been around real transactions. He just hadn't, until that moment, believed I had too. Phil kept jumping in. At some point, Caleb's father wandered back into the conversation and admitted, cheerfully, that he had no idea what we were talking about, but it sounded important. Pam refilled my wine glass without being asked, which I appreciated more than she probably knew. After dinner, when the dishes were being cleared and the kids were chasing each other down the hallway, Derek came and stood next to me by the kitchen counter. He had a glass of bourbon and the specific bearing of a man composing himself. I owe you an apology, he said. Not easily. But he said it. You don't have to. I was condescending earlier. He said it plainly, which was the right way to say it. I made assumptions about what you do, and I talked over you, and that was rude. I looked at him for a second. It was, I said, but I've dealt with worse. He winced a little. That's not a great thing to hear. No, I agreed. It's not. He was quiet for a moment. Caleb talks about you, you know. I knew you were in finance. He stopped, reconsidered, started again. I had a picture in my head, and I didn't let go of it fast enough. That was, I thought, an honest thing to say, more honest than I expected. I appreciate you saying so, I said, and I meant it. Caleb appeared at my shoulder with a slice of pie, which I took gratefully. He looked between his brother and me with the expression of someone who had survived something. You two okay? He asked. We're fine, Derek said. He raised his glass slightly in my direction. Not quite a toast, more of an acknowledgement. Your girlfriend knows her stuff. Caleb smiled. I know. You could have warned me. I did warn you, Caleb said. You didn't listen. Derek laughed at that, and so did I, and somewhere in that laugh, something settled between the three of us that I think is going to make future Thanksgivings easier. On the drive back to the hotel, Caleb reached across the center console and took my hand. I'm sorry about the beginning of that, he said. Stop apologizing for your brother. He was rude. He was, I said. He also apologized and meant it. That's not nothing. Caleb was quiet for a mile or two. The highway was mostly empty, the city lights in the distance, the desert dark on either side of us in that particular Arizona way that makes you feel very small and also strangely calm. You were so patient, he said. I would have said something by the third comment. I know, I said. That's why I didn't let you. He glanced at me sideways. You knew what you were doing the whole time. I thought about that. About the moment I said I led the deal quiet and flat, not as a weapon, but as information. About the way the table had shifted. About Derek's face. Not humiliated, just recalibrating. About Pam refilling my wine. I knew that the truth was going to come out eventually, I said. I just wanted to be patient enough to let it. Caleb squeezed my hand. We drove the rest of the way in the comfortable quiet of two people who don't need to fill every silence. I've thought about that dinner a lot in the months since. Not obsessively, but it returns to me in certain kinds of meetings, certain kinds of rooms. The moments when I walk in and someone has already decided what I am before I've said a word. There's something I've learned about those rooms. You can spend your energy trying to announce yourself, or you can spend it doing the work, clearly and without apology, until the room updates its picture of you on its own. The second way is slower. It requires more patience than sometimes feels fair, but what it produces is different from what the first way produces. When Derek asked me about EBITDA multiples and operating leverage and actually listened to my answers, it wasn't because I'd told him I was worth listening to. It was because he'd seen enough of the work to stop having to be convinced. I'm not interested in vindication. I outgrew that somewhere around year 4 of this career when I realized that the satisfaction of proving someone wrong is real but brief, while the satisfaction of simply being good at what you do is something that compounds over time. I like Derek by the end of the night, actually. He's stubborn and self-assured and quicker to make assumptions than he should be. But he's also the kind of man who can look at a situation that isn't what he thought it was and say I was wrong and mean it. That's rarer than it should be. Caleb's mom hugged me at the door when we left. She held on for an extra second, the way some people do when they've decided they like you. His dad shook my hand and said, "Same time next year, I hope." Pam texted me that night. She'd gotten my number from Caleb, and the text just said, "You were incredible. Call me when you're back in Chicago. I need a friend who does whatever it is you do. I'm going back for Christmas." Derek has already emailed me twice asking about deal flow in the manufacturing sector. I've answered both emails. Thoroughly. He reads fast and asks good follow-up questions. I'll give him that. The quiet at that table, the moment the laughter stopped. I've turned it over enough times now that I know what it was. It wasn't tension. It was the particular quality of a room catching up with itself, recognizing that the picture it had assembled wasn't quite right, taking a breath before it tried again. I've sat in a lot of rooms like that. I'm not tired of them yet. I've been thinking about that dinner table for months now, not the uncomfortable parts, though those were real, but the quiet that came after. The particular quality of a room that has just corrected itself. What happened with Derek wasn't dramatic in the way people might expect. He didn't storm off. I didn't deliver some perfectly timed speech. The truth just arrived at the table the way truth usually does, plainly, without fanfare, and a little later than it should have. I think about cause and effect a lot in my work. In finance, you learn quickly that the story a number tells you isn't always the story that's actually happening. You have to look at what produced the number, what decisions, over what period of time, by which people, under what assumptions. The result is never the whole picture. It's just the visible part of a much longer chain. People work the same way, I've found. Derek didn't walk into that dinner intending to be dismissive. He walked in with a picture he'd already assembled of who Caleb's girlfriend probably was, what she probably did, how much he probably understood about the things he'd spent his career on. That picture was wrong, but it didn't come from nowhere. It came from every room he'd ever been in where the younger woman at the table actually was the junior analyst, where the assumptions held. He'd just never updated them because no one had made him. That's not cruelty. It's a kind of intellectual laziness that's very easy to fall into when you're good enough at something that people stop pushing back on you. And I think about my own part in that evening too. I could have corrected him earlier. There were at least 3 moments in the first hour where I could have laid out my credentials and watched the room shift. I chose not to, partly because I've learned that the ground you earn through patience holds differently than the ground you claim through announcement. But also, I'll be honest, because I wanted to see what he would do with an extended opportunity to be wrong. What he did, ultimately, was recognize it, and then say so, out loud, without being asked. That matters. Not because an apology erases the condescension. It doesn't, not entirely. But because the willingness to look at a situation that isn't what you thought it was and revise your position without making it someone else's fault is a form of integrity that's genuinely uncommon. Derek has it, he just needed the moment to require it of him. There's something I try to carry with me, especially in rooms where I'm still the person someone has underestimated. The work is its own argument. Not a loud one, not an immediate one, but a lasting one. The deals close or they don't. The numbers hold or they don't. The returns are there or they aren't. All the credentials in the world are just promises. The work is the proof. Nora, the version of me sitting at that Thanksgiving table, patient and quiet and waiting, understood something I'm still reminding myself of. that the most effective thing you can do when someone has decided you're less than you are is simply continue being exactly what you are, clearly and without apology, until the room catches up. It usually does. Not always, not fast, but it does.